This is a mini-series. It's a Q&A session with industry leaders within the MSP and consulting space. The focus of this is really to look at any of the stark challenges that we're facing at the moment, from hiring and retention, market shifts, strategy, security, AI, all within the technology sector. So our goal is really to get some hard-hitting insights and practical takeaways from those at the forefront of industry. So we're going to launch this series with Kai Scheppe, the Group CIO of Dish Digital Solutions in Dusseldorf. He brings a wealth of experience in navigating markets complexities, and he's going to share his perspectives on overcoming industry hurdles and keeping a business at the cutting edge. So without further delay, I'm pleased to welcome Kai. Could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get on to tackling those questions.
Sure. Well, I've been in IT for about 25 years, most of it really in leadership positions, gaining experience in startups all the way to huge companies, and now more focusing on medium-sized companies, larger ones. Now with Hospitality Digital, or now as they're called, Dish Digital Solutions, I'm focusing on a merger actually, as we're bringing in new technologies and keeping busy there.
Fantastic, lovely, nice introduction. So without further ado, I'll move on to the questions. And first one was around cybersecurity. So obviously cybersecurity breaches have surged in the past year alone, impacting companies' bottom lines, their reputations. So I really wanted to get some insight onto what's your game plan for ensuring that security doesn't become your Achilles heel, especially as you scale.
Gladly. I mean, I think there's something very interesting about security nowadays. There are a lot of companies out there who are trying to prevent any attacks from happening. And I think that's not going to work. I think that you need to be prepared for an attack to happen. So I believe that resilience is actually more important than prevention. Because in the end, it's an ongoing war. I mean, people are developing new methods and new technologies to breach security measures, and the security industry at the same time, of course, is creating new defenses. But there's always a gap. So there's always a possibility for somebody to gain entrance. And one of the biggest risks that we have really are the employees themselves. Social engineering, for example, etc., are huge topics. So in my mind, it's folly to think that it's not going to happen, to try to prevent it. So think about what are you going to do when it actually will happen. And this is more in terms of how you set up your entire architecture, your infrastructure. I mean, for example, at Dish Digital, we are completely cloud-based. So the infrastructure that we have, if there should be some attack, we could actually destroy it and completely rebuild it. So, getting infected is not necessarily as much of a risk. And this is done on purpose because of that added security that we're gaining through the usage of this technology. And you're not so dependent as you might be, let's say, if you had virtual servers or something like that in that regard. The other thing, of course, is multiple backups. So, I mean, you don't know exactly when you're going to be attacked. Sometimes the time gaps can be actually large. So you need to have a variety of backups going back quite a bit of time. I would say even 3 or 4 months. So you are able to restore, if you have to, at a moment's notice, based on when you notice that the attack actually happened. This is also, again, in terms of resiliency, just having that there. And another aspect of that is also to have a non-connected backup, because a lot of these attacks use the existing connections to find everything there is, and then also infect it or encode it or whatever. So you want to prevent that by having it non-connected. I mean, if that means taking a hard drive and putting it somewhere in your safety deposit box, okay, then so be it. That's what you need to do. And of course, the other thing is that being in the business of creating some sort of a digital product, you're not necessarily at the forefront of cybersecurity. There are specialists out there who know this and live and breathe this, and you need to work with them. So basically retaining third-party companies who will come in and do an analysis and try to actually breach your defenses, point out where you are not as safe as you might be, is also a very important aspect, because you can always go back to the newest know-how that these companies actually have, and thereby eliminate some of the risk of lagging behind in your own development in terms of safety measures. And then, of course, as I had already mentioned, I mean, with employees being the biggest entry point for that kind of an attack, it is very important to generate some awareness within the staff as to what they should and should not do. Social engineering is getting better and better. Phishing attacks are getting really sophisticated. So it is very important to make people aware as to what this looks like. There are patterns, it can be detected, but it's getting difficult. So it's important to school people. And then, of course, I mean, basic stuff like having virus checkers and making sure that they're up to date, etc. And like some of these measures, if you put them together into a package, I think would bring you to a point of being fairly resilient towards these attacks, preventing as much as you can, but if it happens, you're not entirely lost. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think everybody's worked somewhere where one of their colleagues or even themselves have opened an email that they shouldn't have done and let something in. And yeah, so I definitely think upskilling the workforce or being more aware of what potential attacks are going on. And then like with the hackers, they break it or they get away in. So then we have to fix it. And they're going to be creative and they're going to come up with new and insightful ways of how to break into whatever security it is. I mean, it's only a matter of time, isn't it? So by employing a third-party consultancy, they can do that without causing absolute havoc to your network. But I think having the outlook that it's going to happen at some point rather than complete prevention is definitely the outlook to have. No, that's great.
I believe so, yeah.
So with regards to resistance to change, a lot of business leaders, apologies, a lot of business leaders have highlighted internal resistance to change as a real significant barrier to digital transformation. So how are you fostering a culture that not only adapts to change, but can thrive on change?
Well, the interesting thing is the first thing that comes to mind, towards that point is that very often the business leaders are the problem themselves, because they are the ones who are really creating the culture within the company. So you have to have that kind of understanding at C-level that you do want to change, that you do need to invest, etc. And what I find very telling here is looking at IT and the development over time. I mean, there used to be this idea of IT people basically living somewhere in the basement, just wearing black clothing and having long hair, long greasy hair. We are far away from that, And I think nowadays we have an industry where IT really is sort of the driving motor behind most businesses nowadays, and the positioning of IT within a company has changed, such that IT really has to be recognized as a very valuable partner within the company to accomplish the business goals. And that in itself kind of opens up that door to change, because IT moves very quickly. And there's a saying that I was told many, many years ago: there can only be progress through change. So if you want to progress, you have to change. There is no way of continuously doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. I mean, some say that's the definition of insanity. So no, you do have to change in order to progress. And here, I think it is very important to sell the idea to the management, to the business leaders who are not, of course, privy to all of the knowledge and possibilities and understanding regarding IT. So you have to explain it to them. You have to show the new opportunities that really can appear for a company through digitalization, for example. It's like show them the advantages of doing that in speed and cost savings or whatever. And one of the biggest aspects too is a lot of companies would like to have the ability to react to market changes rather quickly. I mean, some competitor might come up with a great idea, and so they have to do something similar. That needs to happen quickly. IT can actually accomplish that. So pointing out some of these aspects will help to foster the idea of being or needing to engage in change in order to improve. And of course, I mean, efficiency, I've already mentioned it. I mean, any type of digitalization is always a good thing when you have manual processes. Anything that you can automate, it makes things faster, cheaper, etc. Plus, you can also remove human error, which is, still a huge issue for a lot of companies. And in the end, you might also end up with a better maintainability by just having, more automated processes, more clear determination of how something actually is done. And if you work on that kind of a conversational level with your colleagues at the C-level, for example, or your manager, then you should be able to see the advantages and promote change, and of course introduce also some of the advantages that you could create for the company by creating certain types of change. And that's it. That's really all you need to do.
Yeah, I've definitely recruited for consultancies in the past where there's been a conflict of interest, and it's been described as a political environment where the ideas from the C-suite are different to those in middle management, and they're different to those on the floor, if you will. But having that open communication and shared vision and the benefits that it'll provide to everyone, customers and workers alike, hopefully it should help foster the culture that you're looking for.
It should, but I think the most important aspect really is to speak the language of those who make the decisions. I mean, you have to sell it to them. I mean, that's really all it is. They have to see the advantage of change. What I mentioned are some of the examples of what can be done, but of course it's specific for any given company. And you need to basically grab them where they see that the advantage is there if they actually improve something on that level. And then it probably would work.
I mean, luckily, if you're working with an MSP or a digital consultancy, everyone's going to be on the tech bandwagon. You would hope so anyway, driving change. It's convincing your customers that they need to do it as well.
Exactly. And I mean, Fish Digital right now, for example, I mean, that's a company that is already built on that kind of DNA, so to speak. And that's, of course, a very nice situation to be in. So, I mean, if you are lucky, then you have colleagues that will understand that, and you don't have much of a sell to actually make because it's already there. They might even demand it. That's good.
Yeah, well, that's one thing when I'm speaking with candidates about various roles. They always want to know that they're working on current, best of breed technologies, and that's another thing that will attract the best people to you. Because, if you're working on something that's legacy, in 5 years' time, your skill set isn't that valuable within the market. So, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a trap there. There's a trap. You need to be careful there, because basically, in the end, just because you're working on the newest thing doesn't mean that it's the best thing. There is still a business to be run. And so the evaluation has to be made on whether it really makes sense to engage in this new technology. It has to bring a return of investment, because anytime when you introduce change like that, it will also cost something. So I think what I like to do, for example, is use something called Tech Radar. It's actually a methodology where you just document where technologies are coming in, where you want technologies to drift out, what you have at the moment. And it kind of looks like a radar screen, when you are working with it. And it's a very interesting tool because it visualizes the technological landscape that a company is currently or has currently. And then you can make a more educated decision on whether it makes sense to introduce change or not. So it always has to be done under the consideration of the business goals. And if it makes sense there, then yes. But just creating change for the sake of change may not be a good idea.
No, and I had I had a conversation with someone recently, and a business they were involved with always wanted the newest, shiniest thing, as opposed to making proper business decisions. And I think a lot of the AI tools that are out at the moment are probably new and shiny, but are they really fit for purpose? And will they stand the test of time? You don't want to be the first adopter. You don't want to be the last adopter. You want to go for what's going to really benefit you long term.
That's true, but that's sort of I would say, an extreme example, because I mean, that is a paradigm shift that we're experiencing right now in the industry. And that's okay. I think right now companies need to play with AI. You need to really gain experience. You need to really, truly play with it and see what you can do with it. Because I think a lot of companies are still developing ideas on how they can harness that kind of power. And that means you really need to experiment. And that is not changed yet. That is just playing. Once you introduce it and start building products on it or services or whatever, then you have a change. And it's a huge change. But that needs to be approached, let's say, in a playful manner.
Yeah, I mean, if we come back to cybersecurity, give it another 10 years and AI will be hacking businesses. You'll be able to set it up to do that.
And AIs probably will be defending, and it'll be interesting to watch.
So moving on to the next question, which is really around emerging trends over the next 3 to 5 years. So what emerging trends within the tech consulting sectors do you think will reshape the industry, and how would you position a company to capitalize on those shifts?
Well, interestingly enough, we just kind of actually highlighted that a little bit. I mean, AI is certainly one of these big new opportunities that are in the market at the moment. And just to reiterate, I think that companies need to play with it. They need to experience it. They need to, get their feet wet and just basically try it out and see what they can do. Because AI can certainly help in a lot of respects, but not in all of them. And you need to, I think the biggest stumbling block right now may be to come up with worthwhile ways of utilizing AI that really generates a benefit for the company. And that, I think, needs a lot of people thinking about it, a lot of playing, tossing ideas about. So active conversation, engaging with staff, I think is extremely important, because a lot of these people are at the forefront and are working with this kind of technology, even at their own level, at a playful level. I mean, like I do myself. I mean, I constantly talk to ChatGPT, and it's interesting to utilize it and work with it. But doing that will generate some ideas, and then you can start engaging in building things. Again, using agile methods, being quick about it, just kind of experimenting and seeing where it goes, and let the customers tell you whether they like it or not, and then go for it. With the fail fast principle, that's really it.
Yeah, I did a post recently talking about that, how AI could enhance rather than replace, and upskilling your team to be able to really utilize it and learn as much as they can about it. Because I think it's a bit of a worry, a certain profession's going to become obsolete through AI, but it should always be an enhancement tool as opposed to a replacement tool, because we want that interpersonal connection, don't we? We're social creatures.
Yes, I totally believe so. I really am not that afraid of AIs. I think they're a wonderful tool to, as you say, to enhance, to utilize its support. It's great, but I don't necessarily see it replacing people that quickly. Will that happen? Most likely, yes. But who knows when and at what level? That remains to be seen. But AI is kind of like, it's a tool. I mean, like a knife. You can cut yourself really badly with a knife, but you can also chop your vegetables and create a great meal. So it really depends on how you use the tool. And I think that's, for me, at least in my point of view, a healthier way of looking at AI. But there's something else also that I think is interesting. It's a bit quiet right now because AI has taken such a breadth of the attention of everybody. It's low code and no code. I mean, if you look at the situation for a lot of business in the sense that there are no specialists out there, nobody's finding IT people, programmers, whatever, it becomes more and more interesting to not necessarily have to rely on that kind of in-depth know-how and sort of spread that kind of work around to sort of, let's say, non-techies. That's perfectly okay. And I think the way that programming will happen at some point in the future is really by a lot of non-developers, marketing people, salespeople, or whatever, using these technologies, because you can utilize the developers to actually create the tools to allow non-techies to really do that kind of coding and sort of just put various bits and aspects together in order to create a functional software, or even, again, using AI to code it. So all of that, I think, is becoming more and more possible. So this is something where the impact, in my mind, has not quite yet been seen. But I'm very curious to see what will happen.
Yeah, I saw someone post something recently talking about how they broke ChatGPT. They implemented a cheat code, and then it actually wrote a full website for them. But within the next few years, that will just become the norm. I suppose this kind of transitions us quite nicely into the final question, which was really around interpersonal skills. So interpersonal skills are increasingly valued at the C level. Most recruiters in a recent survey are talking about how essential they are for leadership roles. So how would you say your skills in negotiation, conflict resolution, or team building have helped shape your career over the companies that you've been involved with?
Greatly, as a matter of fact. I mean, it's always been, for me, a very, very interesting topic. If you look at some of the more iconic leaders that exist in technology nowadays, a lot of them, from what you hear privately, are not exactly pleasant people. And this is very interesting. I mean, as managers, let's say, they're also very unpleasant. Does that mean that somebody has to be that unpleasant in order to be a successful manager in technology? I don't think so. And I think these new generations that we now have working have very different, and in my mind, very, very healthy expectation in terms of work-life balance, for example. And I think it really helps. And this is something that I've always done in my career, is to really recognize the person. It's not a developer. It's not a machine that you tell something, do this, do that, and it spits out some program. No, it's a person. And that person may have a family and a wife and children, etc. And it's very, very important to recognize them as such. So working with staff at that level as human beings and really making them part of the team has always worked extremely well for me. So team building for me is something where I am available to people, where I make a point of learning their names, recognizing them as people, as I said, seeing how they're doing, engaging in conversation, and really taking also a very active interest in their work and the results that they actually produce, and thereby, recognizing the effort that they put in. And this kind of culture has been extremely successful for me. So, for example, churn rates in my departments tend to be very, very low because people do not feel like they need to leave me. I'm in contact with previous employees from previous companies even today. We keep in touch because you have that kind of relationship that you build up. It's an emotional relationship, actually. So it's not me being the CIO and living somewhere in the ivory tower. No, I'm right there. And when things happen with the company, with the product or whatever, and we need to, and this has happened, of course, plenty of times, spend entire nights fixing it, I'm usually there. I may not be able to actively engage in the recovery of the platform or whatever, but I will not expect my people to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And so that, again, fosters a kind of culture that I think really is appreciated by especially also the younger generations nowadays, because that's what they're looking for. Aside from simple recognition for the work, aside from the success, and maybe aside from doing something good for the customers, which are all of the other things that they're looking for. But that interpersonal relationship and making sure that you do have a team is an incredibly important aspect.
Yeah, definitely. It's inspirational. It's aspirational for those team members as well. They see how you're interacting with them, and hopefully in years to come, when they can reach the C level as well, they'll adopt those same sort of philosophies, and it kind of trickles down. I was talking to someone recently about how maybe the remote landscape that we now work in has lost an element of that, because you're not sat next to someone, maybe the other end of a Teams call or something. You're still working alongside them, but have we lost that kind of interpersonal, face-to-face connection that we once had?
I don't know. I mean, quite honestly, it's a very tricky point, quite honestly, because a lot of companies have gone into remote work because they had to, because of COVID.
Yep.
And they found out afterwards the productivity has actually increased. I mean, there are plenty of studies that have shown that. Yet there seems to be a backward movement right now where managers are asking people to come back into the office. And what I find very interesting is that it is sort of couched in the idea of, well, I want to provide them the social environment in order to interact with their colleagues. I'm not sure if that's true. I think there might be more a lack of control or some weird feeling or something like that. Because what I like to do is just tell people, it's like, hey, I'm focusing on the results. We need to create something here, and I need you to do your work. Whether you do that at home or whether you do that here, it's not important to me as long as we do it on time and in the quality that we have agreed upon. However, feel free to come into the office. And the interesting thing is that people really do need that. And there are those meetings, workshops, very intense, where you really need to get something done. Those tend to work better in person, in the same room, et cetera. And I'm fully open to doing that. But I think that sort of vilification of remote work by some people is completely incorrect. I think that, especially in IT, and here I have to sort of put that caveat on it, IT people are already fairly digital in their daily interaction. So they might have a chat going all day. I mean, this is something I've seen over and over again, where constant communication is happening, sort of also feeding into the needs that people have of being reachable and constantly in connection today. That's being fulfilled. So there is a lot of interaction going on. It's just in a digital method or with a digital method and not person to person. But that doesn't mean that they don't have that need every once in a while. And so for me, it's kind of the middle of the road. Allow people to do remote work, but also allow them to come in. Don't necessarily prescribe that, because in my experience, people will find a very healthy middle way and sort of take care of it themselves. It works. Because in the end, and this is what has to still be in the forefront, you have to deliver. That still has to be there. And as long as that is happening, you cannot pinpoint that somehow the remote work really is the problem. That may happen with individuals, but if you cannot pinpoint it, then you shouldn't necessarily disallow remote work. That's all there's to it, really.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm from a sales recruitment background. I feel that if I had been remote at the start of my career, I would have struggled. I wouldn't have progressed as quickly as I had, being around other people. But I can see it within tech. They're used to being on the chat. They come from that kind of background. It's going to be different for each industry, even country to country. It might be slightly different for different sort of sectors, cultures, all sorts. But it's really interesting to get your insights on that. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's fun.
I will stop.